Well, that was the rendition of the South African anthem. Preceding that was the Southern African Development Community anthem. And preceding that was the African Union anthem. Closing off the ceremony there as President Cyril Ramaphosa delivered the closing remarks following what has been a marathon of deliberations in the closed sessions between the various heads of state, accompanied, by the way, each head of state accompanied by 5 interlocutors as negotiators on behalf of their teams. The constant updates we got was that any minute now, and that dragged on for hours as they deliberated on tough issues. But surprisingly, none of that, Mzwai, seems to have come up in that closing speech. We have no idea what it is they disagreed about, except what you and I can speculate right now. And I guess the power of the speech is not in what was said, but rather in what was excluded from it.
In fact, as far as going to check what the president spoke about right at the end, when we realized that when he updated us on the migration issue, he indicated that actually he took the opportunity, and we realized that that was not scripted. So yeah. I guess they were very diplomatic in how they handled the matters that they did not agree upon, and making sure that they don't really amplify some of those, but also focus on that which they agree on, which I think it's perhaps the way to go, because at the end of the day, if you amplify the agreements, so what's the point? Because it's about the commonality of taking this region forward together.
Yeah. Sophia, you're all surprised that there was no mention of Eswatini, no mention of Madagascar, absolutely no mention of the absence of the DRC as well as Tanzania, and no mention other than the migration issue.
Well, I think the president gave a hint that there were points of, I can say, contentious issues that they couldn't agree on. And those sticky points, we know these are 3 main ones. One, there was an elephant in the room, the presence of the president of Madagascar. Now, King Mswati, the head of state of Eswatini, derailed the meeting by insisting that the president was removed from power by the military when the general took over, must be brought in the summit to brief the summit. So it means Rajolina is in Durban. And that was the main issue. And there was a ruling and a view that that cannot happen because the organ on politics, defense and security yesterday has adopted a report updating the organ on the process of ensuring that you help Madagascar to return to democracy. And that process has started. But now that King Mswati, who is the head of state of Eswatini, is the chair of the organ, he can call an extraordinary summit of the organ and reverse the decision. And the heads of state will have to accept that. The other contentious issue was Lesotho and Angola. King Mswati is the chair of the organ. Now you must have the incoming. The outgoing is Malawi, that was chairing from 2025 to 2026. 2026 to 2027, the chair of organ is Swatini. Now you must get the incoming to prepare. Next year will take over. Now Lesotho is saying for 11 years, 11 years ago, when we were supposed to take over the organ, we couldn't because there were challenges and we were on the agenda of the organ and therefore we couldn't take over. Now we've been in this road, you've helped us, we have stabilized. It's time for us to chair the organ. And the other countries saying, we are also ready to chair, that is Angola. But the issue of rotation, so we don't know how they've resolved that. The last issue was the issue of the secretary, the deputy secretary. You know that...
By the way, that was meant to be announced in this closing ceremony.
Yes, they couldn't agree.
Wasn't.
They couldn't agree because you know that we spoke to the Foreign Affairs Minister of the DRC. I spoke to him. They have paid what they owe SADC, but it was late because the process had already started of contesting.
To that, do you find it ironic that the fourth of the 4 legal instruments is an instrument to suspend member states that have been arrested for 3+ years in arrears?
For 4 years. I don't know what's going to happen with Seychelles because it's been suspended because they are not paying. And DRC clearly escaped an X there.
Yeah. So I just want to bring your attention to this. In the speech, President Cyril Ramaphosa says, South Africa will therefore place infrastructure development at the center of its chairship of SADC. He then goes on to say, we must accelerate the establishment of the identified one-stop border post. A truck carrying goods across southern Africa should not spend days waiting at a border. 3 weeks ago, maybe even less than that, we saw 21 kilometers of traffic at the Musina border post, right? I want to note that. But he also says our borders must facilitate legitimate trade and movement while maintaining effective security and customs control. Unlike any other of the other countries in the region, South Africa was on the FATF grey list because the way we facilitate trade and financial transactions lent itself to money laundering, transnational crimes, and very importantly, the financing of rebel organizations and rebel groups. So this is something that South Africa should be a little bit wary and skeptical about, given just, you know, that the instruments aren't sophisticated across the region enough for us to say we can allow this one-stop border post and make it happen. Are you at all surprised by hearing that?
Yeah, but I think he somehow qualified it when before he even announced that, he spoke about how we need to pace up industrialization and open those corridors, so which will be the proper arteries of the economic activity. And I think what he is basically saying is that you need to have proper systems that will be able to allow trade to move easy, not necessarily a free-for-all. I think that's what he's saying. I mean, as much as there wasn't a lot that was said in the speech, perhaps the unsaid is the actually is what matters in this instance.
Yeah. Sophie, earlier on when you and I were in conversation with Vincent Magwenya, I asked you what would success look like, and you said targets and timelines. That's what success. There's only one target and one timeline, one target that has a timeline, and that is the electrification of the region to 85% by 2030 to be reliable electricity. Now, of course, we know that that instrument already exists. South Africa sells electricity to our neighboring countries. In fact, we sold electricity to Zambia when they were going through a drought because they're a hydropowered country. And so when they had a drought, their hydropower facilities and plants didn't work, and Eskom came to the rescue there. We've seen that we have the ability to turn Eskom around, at least where it finds itself now compared to, say, 2 years ago. And so this seems like a realistic target with a realistic timeline to it, something that President Ramaphosa can be like, we can actually achieve that, but nothing else seems to have a definitive target with a definitive timeline. Why do you think that is?
I think it has to do with financing. When you put targets and timeframes for projects, you must be guaranteed that you have a financial muscle. You heard him saying that they will have to raise funds and resources within nations, and then the regional institutions, and of course the continental institution and the global institutions such as IMF and the World Bank. Now, I think that's where the problem is. The issue here is that, at least for me, he answered my concerns and what I was saying when I said he must identify something that will be his legacy in the region, because he's living 2029. When you were sharing, what have you done? Now, he has identified infrastructure, which is a critical issue. And he has a base. There are projects already on the pipeline as it relates to corridors. The Maputo corridor is working. That is why you see all the congestion at the Durban port. But then focus on the roads and the rail infrastructure. The Inga Dam, if I can hear an announcement at the SADC meeting next year on progress, the start of the building of the Inga Dam for electricity supply, the hydro, I would say he has done something. But there are projects, they just need You must just put
In
money.
fact, I want to read you here what he says. He says, we must measure our progress not only in meetings held and agreements signed, but in kilometers of railway rehabilitated, megawatts of electricity generated and transmitted, border crossing times reduced, factories established, intra-regional trade expanded, and jobs created. So it seems quite grand. Maybe just in the last 30 seconds here, Mzwai. The president's final cadence to this speech was to say that this was a successful summit. Was this a successful summit?
Well, this is diplomacy at work as well. Yes, there were things that they agreed upon, so which can be characterized as success. But the fact of the matter is that a lot more still needs to be done, particularly the unsaid.
Yeah. Well, that's where we leave it for now. Lopang, we were meant to have a press briefing by Minister of International Relations, Ronald Lamola, but that is no longer the case as we wrap up here.